Before the Persian Empire's expansion into Europe, the Thracians thrived as a complex network of tribes. While they lacked centralized unity, their strategic location in the Balkans placed them at the crossroads of several major civilizations. This position exposed them to trade and cultural exchanges with the Greeks, Scythians, and others, but it also made them a target for conquest. By the 6th century BCE, the Thracians had developed a distinct identity with strong warrior traditions and a deep connection to their land. Thracian society was organized into tribes, each with its own leaders and territories. This tribal organization meant that, while they often cooperated during external threats, internal rivalries were common. Despite this, the Thracians shared cultural traits such as religious practices, language, and art, which helped unify their identity. These characteristics would later shape their resistance against the invading Persian forces. The Thracians were aware of the growing power of the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great and his successors. Reports of Persian conquests in Asia Minor and the Aegean likely reached the Thracians through Greek traders and exiles. This looming threat spurred some Thracian tribes to strengthen their defenses, while others sought alliances with neighboring states. At the same time, the Thracians maintained a vibrant culture centered around agriculture, metalworking, and warfare. Their ability to produce high-quality weapons and their reputation as fierce warriors gave them confidence in their ability to resist external invaders. However, the scale and organization of the Persian Empire posed a challenge unlike any they had faced before. In 513 BCE, the Persian king Darius I launched a massive campaign to expand his empire into Europe. This campaign targeted the Thracians, as well as the Scythians further north. Darius crossed the Bosporus with a well-organized army, bolstered by naval support. The Thracians, although numerous and brave, were unprepared for the sheer size and coordination of the Persian forces. The Persian army advanced through Thracian territories with little resistance at first. Many smaller tribes surrendered or fled, unable to match the might of the Persian military. However, other tribes, particularly those in the more mountainous and remote regions, mounted a fierce resistance. The Persian campaign was marked by a series of skirmishes and ambushes, as the Thracians used their knowledge of the terrain to harass the invading forces. Despite their initial success in subjugating several Thracian tribes, the Persians faced challenges in maintaining control over such a vast and diverse region. Thracian resistance was not centralized, but it was persistent, with some tribes refusing to accept Persian dominance. These tribes launched guerrilla-style attacks, disrupting supply lines and forcing the Persians to divert resources to maintain their foothold. Darius's primary focus during the campaign was to subdue the Scythians, and the conquest of Thrace was seen as a stepping stone to this goal. However, the difficulty of dealing with the Thracians highlighted the limitations of Persian control in the region. While the Persians established garrisons and collected tribute from subdued tribes, their influence remained tenuous, and many Thracian tribes continued to resist. Under Persian rule, the Thracians experienced significant changes in their political and economic structures. Tribes that submitted to the Persians were required to pay tribute, often in the form of livestock, gold, or manpower. Thracian warriors were recruited into the Persian army as mercenaries, valued for their combat skills and knowledge of local terrain. These warriors would later play pivotal roles in Persian campaigns across the empire. The presence of Persian administrators and garrisons introduced new elements to Thracian society. Persian influence can be seen in certain artistic and architectural styles adopted by Thracian elites, particularly in areas closer to Persian-controlled territories. However, the Thracians were careful to integrate these influences without compromising their cultural identity. Trade between Thracians and Persian territories increased during this period, leading to an influx of luxury goods such as fine textiles, ceramics, and metalwork. Thracian artisans also benefited from exposure to Persian techniques, which enriched their craftsmanship. Despite this economic interaction, the Thracians remained deeply attached to their traditions and resisted full assimilation. The Thracians' relationship with the Persians varied between tribes. While some leaders saw submission as an opportunity to gain wealth and status, others used Persian resources to strengthen their own positions. This pragmatic approach allowed certain Thracian tribes to thrive under Persian rule, while others continued to oppose their overlords through covert resistance. Despite the initial Persian successes, Thracian resistance persisted throughout their occupation. The rugged terrain of the Balkans made it difficult for the Persians to maintain control over the entire region. Tribes in remote areas used guerrilla tactics to challenge the invaders, capitalizing on their intimate knowledge of the land. These revolts, while not always coordinated, demonstrated the Thracians' enduring spirit of independence. One of the most notable uprisings occurred shortly after Darius's campaign, when several tribes in central and northern Thrace united to challenge Persian rule. These revolts were often sparked by heavy taxation and demands for manpower, which strained the resources of local communities. The Thracians' ability to resist, despite their lack of centralized leadership, highlighted their resourcefulness and determination. Persian responses to these uprisings were often brutal, involving punitive raids and the destruction of rebellious settlements. However, these measures only served to deepen Thracian resentment and fuel further resistance. The Thracians' defiance against a powerful empire like Persia became a defining feature of their history, earning them a reputation as a people who valued their freedom above all else. While the Persians maintained a nominal presence in Thrace, their control was ultimately short-lived. By the late 5th century BCE, Persian influence in the Balkans began to wane due to internal challenges and external pressures. The Thracians, through their resilience and adaptability, emerged from this period with their cultural and political identity intact, setting the stage for their interactions with future empires. Throughout the Persian Wars, the Thracians played a significant role as both adversaries and allies to the mighty Persian Empire. When Darius I began his campaign into Europe in the early 5th century BCE, he not only sought to conquer new lands but also aimed to solidify his control over key regions such as Thrace. Thracians, with their warrior ethos and fierce independence, were both a challenging obstacle for the Persians and a valuable resource. Some Thracian tribes resisted Persian rule vigorously, refusing to bow to their overlords and seeking alliances with the Greek city-states in an effort to curb Persian expansion. Others, recognizing the strength of the Persian forces, chose to serve as mercenaries or allies, offering support in exchange for the benefits of maintaining their autonomy under the Persian protectorate. Despite the Thracian and Athenian appeals for Thracian aid against the Persian threat, the involvement of the Thracians in the Persian Wars was often marked by complex and shifting alliances. Tribes like the Odrysians, under the leadership of their kings, maintained their independence while engaging in diplomatic maneuvers that allowed them to play both sides. Some Thracian tribes sided with Darius and later Xerxes I, providing valuable mercenaries and even cavalry to bolster Persian forces. Their knowledge of the terrain and guerrilla warfare techniques proved advantageous to the Persian war effort, particularly in battles fought on unfamiliar ground. However, these alliances were often short-lived, as the Thracians prioritized their own interests and identity over allegiance to foreign rulers. In addition to their role as mercenaries, the Thracians had a substantial impact on the Persian military. Thracian cavalry, with their distinctive mounted fighting style, became an essential part of the Persian forces, offering speed and flexibility that the more traditional Persian infantry lacked. The Thracian warriors' proficiency with the spear and sword, as well as their ability to execute swift, unpredictable attacks, made them formidable allies for the Persians, especially in regions where cavalry could outmaneuver heavier, slower units. The Persian Empire, known for absorbing and incorporating local cultures and tactics into their military strategy, adopted many Thracian techniques, including their effective cavalry formations and weapons, which were eventually integrated into the Persian military system. Despite these tactical advantages, the Thracians were not content to remain subjugated for long. Their participation in the Persian Wars did not come without consequences. As the Persian Empire extended its reach into Thrace, the Thracians faced increased pressure from the Persian military to submit to Persian rule. The heavy taxes and demands for military service created tensions among the Thracian tribes, leading to revolts and uprisings. Thracians were constantly caught in a difficult position between the overwhelming power of the Persian Empire and their desire for freedom. Even as they served the Persians, they never abandoned their cultural values of independence, and their resistance against foreign rule remained a persistent theme throughout their interactions with the Persian Empire. The Battle of Plataea, fought in 479 BCE, marked a turning point in the Persian Wars, signaling the end of Persian expansion into Greece and the Balkans. The Greek city-states, united under the leadership of Sparta, decisively defeated the Persian army, forcing the Persians to retreat from mainland Greece. This victory had significant implications for the Thracians, as it effectively curtailed the Persian threat to their territory and sovereignty. In the aftermath of Plataea, many Thracian tribes, which had been under Persian influence or had been coerced into alliances with the empire, saw an opportunity to assert their independence once again. The Thracians were emboldened by the defeat of the mighty Persian Empire and seized the moment to renew their resistance to Persian rule. In the years following Plataea, many of the Thracian tribes that had been subdued by Persian forces began to assert their autonomy. The Persian Empire, already stretched thin from its costly campaigns in Greece and Egypt, lacked the resources to re-establish its dominance over the Balkans. As Persia's military focus shifted toward other fronts, such as the conflict with the Greeks and the Egyptians, the Thracians were able to capitalize on the weakening of Persian power. With their ancient warrior spirit revitalized by the Greek victory, the Thracians began to reclaim lost territories and re-establish the fragmented tribal alliances that had once made them a powerful force in the region. The Thracian resurgence was marked by a series of rebellions against Persian garrisons and tribute collectors stationed in Thrace. These revolts were characterized by coordinated uprisings, often led by powerful Thracian chieftains or kings who had managed to maintain control over their tribes during the Persian occupation. These leaders sought to restore their people's independence, using a combination of guerrilla tactics, strategic alliances, and diplomatic efforts to expel the Persians from Thracian lands. The Thracians' intimate knowledge of the terrain and their ability to mobilize quickly made it difficult for the Persians to maintain their grip on the region. While the Persian Empire was not entirely expelled from the Balkans after the Battle of Plataea, its influence in the region dramatically diminished. The Thracians, aided by the declining Persian strength, regained much of their autonomy. The power vacuum created by the Persian retreat allowed local leaders to strengthen their tribes and pursue new alliances, particularly with the Greek city-states. These shifts in political power laid the groundwork for the future of Thrace, as the region would see the rise of new powers, such as the Macedonian Kingdom under Philip II and his son Alexander the Great, who would forever alter the course of Balkan history. With the decline of Persian influence in the Balkans, the Thracians began to rediscover and assert their cultural identity. Although the Persians had left their mark on Thracian military practices and some aspects of governance, the core of Thracian culture rooted in their art, religion, and social structures remained resilient. The Thracians had a rich tradition of oral history, myth-making, and religious practices that were deeply connected to the natural world and the spirits of their ancestors. With the departure of the Persians, the Thracians once again had the freedom to express their cultural heritage without foreign interference, leading to a revitalization of many aspects of their civilization. Thracian art and craftsmanship, particularly their metalworking, flourished once again after the Persians retreated. The Thracians were renowned for their intricate gold and silver jewelry, finely crafted weapons, and distinctive pottery. Artifacts from this period, such as the famous Panegyrishti treasure, are testament to the Thracians' advanced techniques in metalworking and artistry. The Thracians also continued their tradition of burying their elite members with lavish grave goods, a practice that reinforced their belief in the afterlife and the importance of preserving their cultural identity for future generations. The Thracians also continued their religious practices, which were heavily influenced by animistic beliefs, polytheism, and nature worship. Their gods and deities were often tied to the natural world, and religious rituals played a central role in their social and political life. Temples, sanctuaries, and ritual sites dedicated to gods such as Zalmoxis and Bendis, who were revered as deities of the underworld and the moon, were built and maintained throughout Thracian territory. These religious practices remained a unifying factor for the Thracian tribes, even as they interacted with the Greeks, Romans, and other neighboring cultures. In the centuries following the Persian withdrawal, the Thracians continued to thrive as a distinct cultural entity within the Balkans, even as they faced new challenges. The emergence of Macedonia as a dominant power in the region under Philip II and Alexander the Great posed a new threat to the Thracians, but it also offered opportunities for cultural exchange and influence. Macedonian rule in the region brought with it new Greek-inspired ideas and practices, which were blended with traditional Thracian elements. This fusion of cultures would contribute to the development of a unique Thracian-Greek hybrid civilization in the centuries that followed. The 4th century BCE saw the decline of Thracian power in the face of rising political forces in the region. Among the most significant was the rise of the Macedonian Kingdom under the leadership of Philip II. As Philip sought to consolidate power in the Greek world, he expanded Macedonian influence across the Balkans, including into Thrace. Thracians, though fierce warriors, faced the military genius of Philip and his son, Alexander the Great. The Macedonian army, with its advanced military tactics and formidable phalanx formations, was a challenge that the fragmented Thracian tribes could not easily withstand. The Macedonian conquest of Thrace marked a significant shift in the region's political dynamics, as many Thracian tribes were either defeated in battle or forced to submit to Macedonian authority. Macedonian expansion into Thrace was not entirely bloodless. Resistance from the Thracians was fierce and persistent. King Cotys I of the Odrysian Kingdom, one of the most prominent Thracian rulers at the time, made several attempts to maintain Thracian independence from Macedon. However, his efforts were undermined by the superior Macedonian military tactics and diplomatic maneuvering. Even when the Thracians allied with Athens and other Greek states to challenge Macedonian dominance, the sheer power of Philip II's military machine proved overwhelming. Despite their resistance, the Thracians found themselves increasingly under Macedonian influence and eventually under direct Macedonian control. The defeat of the Thracian resistance and the growing dominance of Macedon in the region had significant consequences for Thracian culture and political structure. Once unified under strong kings like Cotys I, the Thracians saw their lands divided and weakened as they were absorbed into the expanding Macedonian Empire. Thracian leaders, who had once commanded respect and influence, were now relegated to the status of client kings under Macedonian supervision. The once great kingdom of the Odrysians, which had been a power to be reckoned with in the Balkans, was reduced to a shadow of its former self, and many other Thracian tribes fell under the sway of Macedonian rule. This marked the end of Thracian political dominance in the region. Although the Macedonian Empire absorbed much of Thrace, elements of Thracian culture endured and continued to influence the larger Hellenistic world. The Thracians were known for their art, religion, and unique warrior culture, which left an indelible mark on the peoples who came after them. Under Macedonian rule, many Thracian elites still retained a measure of their former power, and Thracian soldiers, renowned for their skill and ferocity, became a valued part of Alexander's army. Furthermore, the cultural exchange between the Thracians and the Greeks, catalyzed by Macedonian conquest, led to a fusion of Greek and Thracian traditions, especially in the realms of art, religion, and governance. While the political power of the Thracians had diminished, their cultural legacy lived on, influencing the course of history in the Balkans for centuries to come.